Well, hello. How is it going? It is March 13th, 2024, and this is the RambleCast. We don't have a Corbin today. He's unavailable. Wouldn't share why. I'm guessing he is currently out committing acts of spying for foreign governments. Corbin works for China. Confirmed right here. So, yeah. And we'll actually kind of be dancing back to that subject later. But sorry. Anyway, so it's been a week. There's been a few things that have happened. It's one could certainly debate about various tech news that has come up this week, but it's been a week for some legal news. There's actually been kind of a lot of things popping up over the last week that have really left us with an interesting taste in our mouths for courtroom drama again. Certainly promising the crazier of crazy is coming. So let's see. I'll jump right into this one. Oh, and by the way, if anybody notices if my lighting goes really weird, so on this side of me I have a window that the sun is currently kind of blasting through. That's gonna come and go. But right now it's overpowering the much larger light that I have in this room. Wow, it's changing really fast right now. There, that kind of fixes it for a minute. Anyway, as it changes and gets weird, if I go horribly out of view, let me know, and I will try to fix it. As I see, oh man, I literally, right after I change it, the sun died down a bit. So, bring it up a little bit more. Yeah, lighting is going to be all over the place today. Anyway, so, oh wait, what just, did I bump that by accident, or, trying to try adjusting this. It's a little bit of a throw a dart at the wall kind of a thing. Okay, we're gonna go with this for right now. Hopefully this will be good for a little bit. Okay, so we may as well start with something that it's wild that this feels like it was a long time ago already, but no. The EU is possibly going to slap Apple over some comments that it made regarding Epic. Now, this story already kind of has a little bit of a follow through, but this all started when Apple decided to cancel Epic's developer account in, let's see, technically what country was it? Oh, did I already pass over it or something? Okay, I don't remember exactly, but Epic opened a developer account in one of the countries in the EU. Is it pulling from the wrong mic? Hold on, let me check. It shouldn't be. That would be really, really unusual. Oh, static too? Okay. Here, let me try unplugging the mic and plugging it back in. Maybe there's an explanation there. So, I will cut out for just, let me find the cable. That's the one. I'll cut out for just about 10 or 15 seconds. Okay. Let's see that. Yep, it's on the right mic. So, is it sounding better now? Also, I can see my exposure's gone wacky again. Much better? Okay. Man, I'm gonna have so many problems with exposure while the sun's going through this window. I used to put something up over the window when I streamed, but haven't done that in a while, and I'm thinking maybe I'm gonna have to go back to doing that. Let's drop down the exposure again. Okay, that kind of fixes it. It is still super, super bright. All right. So, Curvy, how's it going? Good to have you here. So, let's see. Yeah, anyway. Of course, we all know this part of the story. Apple canceled one of Epic's developer accounts, or rather, the developer account that they were going to launch a store over. Going good? You got McDonald's delivered? There's something about that just doesn't compute. I mean, if you're gonna have something delivered, why McDonald's? Well, there are many things that don't compute. Why McDonald's at all? But especially if you're gonna have it delivered, like Chipotle, at least. Maybe something from a good deli. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not trying to bully, just saying. Like, oh, money limited till Friday. Okay, I kind of get that, though. Don't you live really close to a few really good places? I feel like delivery gets nullified if you can just like walk half a block and get some good Mashables. Anyway, man, I'm really underexposed. This is gonna be such a weird mess. I wish I could set this to like it. Well, can I guess I could set this to an auto exposure. I don't know how well that'll work though. Plus, in my experience, auto exposure does weird things with green screens. Okay. Anyway, so this mess with Epic led to, unsurprisingly, Apple making up various excuses for why they don't want to let Epic have their own store in the EU. Now, anyone can read into that however they like. I'm not going to bother even trying to come up with... I'm not going to try like justifying or rationalizing their reasons. But essentially, it was very obvious. Apple's just very petty about Epic. And I get why. But at the same time, let's be honest, they deserve to be slapped over it. So, Epic then basically said, yeah, well, say what you like, but you have to honor it. And in the meantime, the EU basically looked at what Apple had said as its rationale for banning Epic's account, and one of the comments had to do with basically Epic has a history of breaking our rules. We set out some rules, they break them. We set out different rules, they broke them again. We can't trust them. Therefore, if we let them have their own app store, how can we trust that they're not going to break new rules? This is actually a reasonably valid argument. It's not a great argument because, well, for reasons, but it's not the worst in the world. The problem is, it then went on to accuse Epic of basically slanderous behavior and say that because Epic criticized Apple, that was another reason why they shouldn't be allowed to have a store. The EU did not take kindly to this read on the situation and has basically suggested that Apple was threatening Epic in the sense of basically this is a little bit of a read between the lines, but effectively saying,
Apple was inferring to Epic that by being critical of Apple, they don't get to have a store in the EU, which is that is a threat. I mean, it's definitely reading between the lines to get to the point of calling it a threat, but the inference is pretty strong. So yeah, since this was it elevated to the point of basically company A threatening company E, Apple has turned around and said, never mind, our bad. Epic, you get to have your account back, and good luck with your store. So, slowly but surely, we're seeing Apple actually having to bow to the will of the EU. Very, very slowly, but it is happening. So, to members of the EU who are looking forward to having some Fortnite on your iPhone, the day is coming. Someday. Eventually. Maybe. Kind of. We'll have to see. Because this kind of brings us to the next Apple versus Epic fight. Wait, did I? Yeah, here it is. Wow, I put these out of order. So this particular drama is happening in the US, but it will very likely also have impact in the EU when it gets to that stage. This particular case won't impact the EU, but rather I think we're going to see the same arguments playing out there. And I'll get to that part shortly, but Epic is asking a judge to actually enforce the a ruling that was set in 2021 where the judge basically told Apple, hey, you have to let apps link to outside payment options. That has to be a thing. Like, you're now stuck there. You can't wiggle out of this. You can't come up with your own set of BS rules. You have to actually allow this. Let's see. I just noticed my green screen. It has a little bit of a shadow on it at that far side. I don't know if that fixes it yet, but we'll see. I don't think it... No, it didn't. Alright, I don't know that I can really fix that too easily right now. Would that do any good? Oh, it's basically the edge of that green screen. Okay. The other fix for it is I'll just turn the monitor a little. Okay. And turn that light back. It's all of this is put together with duct tape and cloth. So anyway, so Apple is now possibly going to go back to court, effectively to argue that they complied with the judge's ruling and that their very creative methods of trying to continue bilking developers for money may in fact actually be legitimate. Meanwhile, Epic is arguing, no, look, you created this set of rules where technically people can point to outside payment providers, but you're still blocking them from you're still blocking developers from getting the types of data that they're supposed to be able to get. You're still blocking developers from having different kinds of monetization strategies. And very importantly, you want to charge this outrageously high percentage when none of it is actually passing through you. So basically, this is not in the spirit of the ruling. You just found a way to work around it by coming up with a lot of really ridiculous requirements. Now, whether or not this will work, we'll see. Obviously, Epic is just trying to get back a big percentage of what people spend on Fortnite, on any of the other games that go through Epic. We'll see if that works. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I have a feeling the court is going to look at what Apple did and basically say, look, this is pushing the bounds of the ruling a little too far. And in all honesty, I think the only reason that might happen is because the court may look at this and just decide that Apple was too egregious in its pricing structure. And in truth, I wouldn't be surprised if this approaches the point of them saying, you know what, we recognize that if Apple were to decide that they wanted to change their pricing, so let's say for outside payment providers, maybe they decide to charge an even higher percentage someday, it would be the effective equivalent to preventing companies from using outside payment providers. At which point they would justifiably have a ruling setting out that Apple has to have a reasonable pricing attached to this. Not necessarily that it be prevented, but that it has to cover only what Apple needs in order to keep the developer program from losing money. But not so much that it can be used as a deterrent to using outside payment providers. That is my guess. I don't know for sure exactly how this will play out. It obviously depends a little bit on which judge they end up getting. Which I guess technically this may go back to Judge Yvonne Gonzalez-Rogers. Though I'm not sure if necessarily she will take this. I'm not entirely clear on how that works. Regardless, this is going to get kind of creative. Also, Epic highlighted, and this is a smaller detail, but it is notable. Epic highlighted that there is a requirement in Apple's policies here that says you must use a, quote, plain button style to advertise that there is another option for payment providers. What that the catch to that, the caveat, is that apparently this is not something that is visible enough, and Epic is basically saying, look, this is a means of Apple trying to steer customers back to using Apple's payment provider, and therefore it is essentially steering. Well, it is a form of steering, which isn't specifically prohibited in the judge's ruling, but also, again, kind of falls into that same the spirit of the ruling. So, yeah, a lot of courtroom drama bound to come up. Now, all of this leads us, of course, to yet another Apple event happening this week, which is Apple has now announced the ability to download iPhone apps from websites, but only in the EU. So if you're in the European Union, in theory, you could start distributing apps. Or actually, I guess, sorry. If you're anywhere, you could start distributing apps through a website, but only to iPhones in the EU. This is a mess. Apple's being comically disingenuous with this one. So this is a very... This one comes with possibly more ridiculous restrictions than almost any of their other malicious compliance instances lately. So if you actually look at the regulations on this, the rules that they set forth. So first off, here's the announcement. This is the whole thing. It's barely a page. Basically, it says, look, we're allowing alternative app marketplaces. We're allowing you to link out to make your purchases elsewhere. And now we're adding distribution from websites. this looks good on the surface. It's when you go into the actual documentation, or rather their more detailed explanation for web distribution specifically, that you start to see how absurd this actually gets to be. So they have some eligibility requirements on who is allowed to do this. And oh boy. So let's see. Now that's annoying. I had highlighted this section earlier. Where's it at? Okay. So here's some of the key criteria that, and I'm pulling from MacRumors just because it's a little easier to spot. Okay, so some of the criteria. You have to have been a member of the Apple Developer Program for 2 continuous years or more, and have an app with more than 1 million first installs on iOS in the EU in the prior year, and commit to other requirements like publishing transparent data collection policies and so on and so forth. So, in other words, in order to distribute your app through a website, which at this point, like, why? What are you getting out of this? And I honestly cannot come up with an answer to that, but maybe we'll dig into that later. So you have to already have an app that has, at the very least, made 1 million downloads in the last year. But on top of that, note the wording of this, which actually, okay, maybe there's a chance MacRumors misunderstood this. Let me double check. Nope, it is spelled out here very clearly. Okay, so yeah, it says be a member of good standing in the Apple Developer Program for 2 continuous years or more, which actually that member of good standing part does mean that at Apple's discretion, they can basically just say, oh, you're not in good standing. We're not going to let you do this anymore. But let's see. The fact that it requires that you have already been in the program for 2 years feels a little bit shady, because they're basically going to just pick on accounts that are new and may actually be longtime well-recognized developers. But if you're relatively new, relatively upcoming, yeah, you're still required to be in Apple's care for at least 2 years. That part alone is already kind of in poor taste. The second part, this is magical to me. So an app, your account is required to have at least one app that has had more than 1 million first annual installs on iOS in the EU in the prior calendar year. So you would have had to have 1 million people install one of your apps. And I don't know if this would be okay across, let's say, 2 apps, but I'm guessing that it wouldn't be. But you have to get 1 million people, new people, each year to install one of your apps, just so you could distribute apps separately through a website. That is unbelievable. That is an unbelievable requirement. How they think that this is acceptable is mind-boggling. But okay, so this is just so you can distribute through a website instead of Apple's App Store. Now, I'm also curious about the why. Why would you, oh, by the way, you also have to do things like get your apps notarized by Apple. That's still a requirement. And actually, that one I don't really object to, though I think it raises a couple of other concerns. And your app still has to actually be compliant to all of the other regulations, restrictions, so on and so forth. Basically, your app has to be something that could still be put onto the App Store. So, yeah, there's that. These are all problems that aren't really, like, why are you distributing through a website at this point? Nothing really changed. Now you might be thinking, what about distributing so that you could save some money? You know, let's say the various fees that Apple charges. Well, it's not various, it's the one fee. But that's where the core technology fee comes in. This is something that we've discussed in the past. It is the exact same thing, which is basically saying, oh, hey, do you want to distribute outside the App Store? Well, we're going to charge you for every single install over the first million. So you have to be popular and famous enough that you would have at least 1 million downloads from the App Store in order to distribute on a website. And then once you distribute on a website, then anything over the first million, even if it's the same app being distributed in two places, anything over that first million, you're going to have to pay extra on. So, yeah. This is by any reasonable... plus, anything that people pay, you also have to pay your share of. So, yeah. This is comically inappropriate. I have a feeling the EU is going to slap Apple so hard for this. It's just going to take way too long for it to happen. Everyone keeps using the term malicious compliance to describe this. At this stage, I actually almost feel bad for having used it before most people had. But yeah, this is the definition of going above and beyond to twist the rules so that no one would ever consider taking your absolutely abysmal policies and using them. Everyone, if they want to distribute to iOS, is really just going to have to stick to distributing through the App Store. There's no reason whatsoever to do anything else. So, anyway, enough of that. And in fact, am I right in saying this? Yes, that is the end of the Apple news for today. Believe it or not. Instead, we are going to flip over to Google. I didn't set anything off as I said that. This is kind of a neat one. I'm actually happy to see this because it also oddly confirms something that I predicted like 2 years ago. So, Google is apparently working on a project called SIMA, S-I-M-A. SIMA is apparently an AI that is learning how to play video games. More specifically, Google is using something based on DeepMind to train on how to play video games. The idea here ultimately is to build something that could work as, let's say, an extra player in the game. For example, if you and a friend want to get together and play a game, but it's a game that really plays better with 4 players, then SIMA would be able to spin up 2 additional players, both based on AI, that could play, let's say, roughly to your level and help you actually complete the game or play, comparable to how a normal person would play. They would not over excel in a game. They would not be more powerful. They wouldn't have like a bunch of secrets or crazy inside knowledge. They would basically just be able to play the game competently. At least that's roughly the theory. I think we all know better. But so SIMA is this really neat idea that it does have some purpose. It does have some function. What I find kind of funny about this is I actually predicted this exact same thing a few years ago, but I predicted it as, here's a reason for Stadia. One of the best things about Stadia is it gave Google the ability to see exactly how people played video games. It was a thing that they could record every single controller movement. They could document exactly what people saw. They had every single bit of information and detailed knowledge, except, like live brain scans. They had everything they needed in order to train this AI. And at the time, I kept saying, one of the big reasons for having Stadia is it gave Google a bunch of information that nobody else had. How people play video games. So here we go. In all fairness, I really think that that's yet again one of the things that may have been a mistake to shut down Stadia, because frankly that was a ton of training data. Or counter to that, it leaves me wondering, how much of that did they save? Did they possibly save a lot of that training data and we just don't know it? I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere in the license, the end user license, maybe Google straight up says, hey, we're going to record how you play the game, we're going to record a few details, and it'll be anonymized. We don't actually care that who's playing and how they're playing. We just care that you're playing, and we can analyze that. I don't know. I have not read back through any of the old license agreements. I don't care to, but I would be shocked if there wasn't something to that effect, because logically Google should be looking at that, because they had more of it than anyone in the world, ironically. So yeah, anyway, SEMA looks like a good idea. I'd kind of like to see this become a feature in more things. And it's not the only project where AI is going into gaming. There are, for example, a couple of companies that are using AI to develop anti-cheat detection, or rather detecting cheaters, which in theory would be used as an anti-cheat mechanism. The way it typically does that is by actually looking at how, or being trained on how people play a game, and then being able to look at basically where does a player deviate, if a cheater is deviating, and like how quickly they can respond to something, if it's superhuman, if a player is deviating by the types of movements that their mouse or controller makes, if they're deviating in various other ways. A lot of anti-cheat stuff already tries to look at this stuff, but it's honestly misses a lot. Seeing as I report people on Overwatch on basically like every time I play, and almost every time I log into Overwatch, there's a message pop up saying, yeah, we took action on someone, thank you. It, to me, is a pretty good sign that Overwatch's built-in anti-cheat methods and their cheat detection obviously are not working very well. They're not sufficient, so they have to have people moderating. Anyway, there's a lot of cool AI going into gaming, and the idea of giving people a AI partner that's actually like more human-like and not just a dumb bot that's weirdly good at aiming, that's actually kind of a good idea. And hello, David, how's it going? How's your week doing? Let's see. So far, I am blowing through topics pretty quickly, though, to be fair, there's actually not been as much to say about a couple of these. Let's see. So, we may as well talk about, I would say, the biggest legal story of the week, if it becomes true. A ban on TikTok, or a possible ban on TikTok. So, the summary for those who may not have been totally caught up on this is there is a bill that has so far been introduced, and now has been voted on and passed the U.S. House. The bill basically, without getting into every detail, but getting more detailed than a lot of the short descriptions people are giving, what this bill does is it basically says that the U.S. can ban the apps of, or it can ban social media apps or pretty much anything that collects a lot of private user data. It can ban those apps if they are based in a country that is one of the United States like enemies or rivals. So this includes countries like Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, etc., etc. Basically, the countries that we actually think of as the bad guys. So the odds of a social media app coming out of most of those countries, not super high. I don't think we're about to see the Iranian government popping up with the next TikTok, but it is an interesting notion. So the counter to this is if that company were to sell off its ownership of that app, or rather if the company itself were sold, then as long as it goes to not an enemy of the United States, it can continue to exist. Or rather, it can continue to operate in the United States. So, and if I remember correctly, technically this is not a true ban. This is one part I may have misunderstood, but I don't know that it's necessarily a true ban, but rather anyone who is responsible for distributing it would be liable for charges, monetary charges that would be prohibitively expensive. So, there's a lot of we'll sees to that, but regardless, getting back to kind of the more important details. So this has now passed the U.S. House of Representatives. It's going on to the Senate. At this stage, right now, it's unclear if the Senate will actually pass this. The odds look good, but not enough people have committed to it that it's a sure thing. And the vote hasn't happened yet, to my knowledge. And I don't think it happens. I don't know that it's been scheduled. I actually wish I knew that answer. Regardless, Biden has basically said he's going to sign it if it makes it to his desk. So the odds are very good that this is, in my opinion, I think if Biden is saying he's backing this, I would be shocked if the Senate doesn't also pass it first. Or, well, pass it, and then, of course, it would go onto his desk. So, yeah, pretty sure this will be happening. So, David brings up a great point. Can it be taken to the Supreme Court? Yes. Basically, what would then happen is ByteDance could appeal the decision and pressure that, or not pressure, but they could appeal the decision and ask the Supreme Court, is this legal? Effectively, there are a few different things that they could try to use as a defense. Basically, like, is this a violation of First Amendment rights? Is this is this a type of illegal interference in business? They could technically argue, I mean, this was a stretch, but they could technically argue that this is counter to counter to the interests of the US population by virtue of like basically shutting down avenues of business. They could even make some weird arguments about picking winners. A lot of this stuff the Supreme Court is not going to even listen to, but there's possibilities. You never know. So would it go to the Supreme Court? It can. Yes, absolutely. They could file to basically have the Supreme Court rule that this isn't that Congress does not have the right to lay out this kind of a ban. Would the Supreme Court side with ByteDance? Look, I'm just gonna say not a effing chance. None. I don't think the Supreme Court sides with ByteDance in any scenario whatsoever. Mostly because they've already been pretty anti-tech. Actually, I suppose if they're trying to take a slap at Google and Facebook and a couple of the others, maybe. But for the most part, the Supreme Court has not been friendly to tech companies. ByteDance, a tech company, yeah, probably not going to get any big wins here. So, David, seems pretty bipartisan at this point. Yeah. And that is a very notable detail. In the House, this vote passed 352 to 65. Look, I'm sorry, but that is wild. That is wild. That is a lot of yes votes for a bill. That is a lot for any bill. Even by bipartisan standards, unless you have unanimous support, you very rarely have anything crossing like 300. So the fact that they got it to this point, yeah, both sides of the aisle clearly support this, which I very much want to talk about that in a little bit more detail in a second. But yeah, very clearly this is getting bipartisan support, and obviously the House can be a little bit wild. It doesn't always necessarily go with the smartest choices, but yeah, I mean, the fact that it got that much support in one chamber, the odds that the Senate doesn't pass this, I think are so minuscule. I mean, this is just kind of huge, all things considered. Oh, David, I'm so glad you just said that. It is bonkers, and they must have some information that we don't. So I have said these words before. Maybe not verbatim, but I've said this very thing before. It just so happens that Nilay Patel made a comment that encapsulated something I said very well. Oh, hey, I'm getting a caller. No. Someone trying to survey some random thing. Okay. Anyway, Nilay Patel said a great thing about this. Like I said, it's something I've asked on RambleCast and I think in Discord before. To quote him, "If Congress wants to ban TikTok, it should probably show us the evidence of Chinese interference." Going on with this quote, "We've heard so much about the dangers of TikTok from both sides of the aisle, and even had Trump flip-flop his position ostensibly over the political calculations of banning an app 170 million Americans use. But what exactly did the House Select Committee see in its secure briefing that led them to vote 50-0 in favor of the bill that would ban the app? If this thing is going to move forward in the Senate, it seems like we should at least know the basics." I've asked this question before. I've asked this question a lot. It's not that I am actually doubting that the Chinese government has been sticking its nose into TikTok. We know that they have. At a bare minimum, at a bare minimum, as many people have pointed out, one of the biggest differences is not something that you don't know. It's not a secret. It's just something that only gets talked about in limited amounts. If you go look at what the app looks like in China, and you go look at what it looks like here in the US, and when I say looks like, I mean, what content are they pushing to the top? In China, you typically get longer videos that are more educational, more intellectual, more of, let's just say, higher cognitive value. In the US, you get stuff that's barely a step above people laughing at fart noises. I'm not saying that this is a secret. It's something lots of people have talked about and kind of dug into. But the practical reality is, we know that China's government has 100% pushed the idea of, yeah, can we just make Americans stupider? If we encourage them to watch stupid stuff, can we just make them stupider by proxy? And clearly that's working. And we know that this is part of their system. There's no mystery there. It's not even a secret. And look, TikTok has even tried to make up explanations for why this is. They basically said, look, we just gave Americans what the algorithm seems to think that they like. Well, that's not what China does. TikTok in China does not, quote, give them what they like. It gives them what they want them to like. And yeah, there is a difference. There's a clear difference, and they're not really hiding that. So at a bare minimum, we know that the Chinese government has had its influence. It's had its hand in that particular set of decisions. Does that still matter today? Is it still a thing that the Chinese government's even involved in today? I don't know. I have no way of knowing. I kind of almost don't care. I just use this as a point of reference. I think it's worth bringing it up. Let's see. David, I'm sure it's just some random minuscule thing, kind of like the Huawei ban backdoors my butt. The last part's a funny turn of phrase, but anyway, I do think this is a little different than the Huawei ban, but certainly, yeah, it falls into the same sort of it's that same threshold of, we see you doing this, you're telling us that there's a threat, but dear US government, you can't just take this matter completely into your own hands without giving us a little bit more. Now, do you need to tell us exactly what is happening? Probably not. Do you need to tell us how you got the information? Definitely not, because chances are you're actually getting it through means that aren't legal, or you're getting it through whistleblowers or something. Or to share the information would be telling them how to close whatever gaps they have in their security that would allow somebody to figure out, oh, you're up to this bad thing or that bad thing. There are obviously numerous aspects to why you can't just openly share that information, but you do have to give us a little bit more. And that, I think, is genuinely a real problem, a real consideration, a real concern. We do need to hear a little bit more. And it seems that we're just not ever going to get that. So yeah, if TikTok is banned, I think that'll be a factor. Very notably though, and I would like to bring this up because I think it is relevant. I do kind of wonder if, David, you just happen to ask both questions. What happens if ByteDance fights this in the courts and basically says that pushes this as a needlessly xenophobic thing and challenges the US government to provide evidence that a so-called enemy is in fact doing any of this stuff. The Supreme Court could ultimately say, you know what? Yeah, no one has actually provided any proof. No one's provided any evidence. Maybe you should actually give us something. Show us your work, so to speak. At which point TikTok could be, they could have a pretty good grounds for saying, this is all just needlessly xenophobic and pointless. Hello, Austin. Hello, Carson. How's it going, guys? I like that you say getting to the good part. The rough side is I'm not sure how much longer I'm even going because I've already hit pretty much all of my topics. But yeah, so at this point I do question, like, where does this go? Because at this stage I think the bill is getting passed. That is a given. Or not a given, but the odds that this bill doesn't pass, they're very, very tiny. The Senate, I truly think, is going to pass it. Biden has basically already said it's a sure thing. So I think we're going to see this pass. Will ByteDance fight it? I'd be shocked if they don't. They'll obviously try taking it to the courts. Where it goes from there, who knows? Again, I don't see it turning out in their favor, but you never know. It is one of those things where the courts could decide in their favor on a technicality, but by and large, I think the courts are also inclined to favor what Congress votes in on this. Man, my camera settings, I keep having to manually tweak them because the sun coming in the window is just all over the place. And if it passes through, if the bill fully passes, gets signed in, and then it manages to survive the courts, at which point, what does TikTok do? And I'm hitting this before you get to Carson's question, because I do think that's also an interesting one. But what does TikTok do? Or what does ByteDance do? Does ByteDance commit to sticking by its guns and selling to some other company? Because there is a very credible possibility of this. There have been companies that have expressed interest in owning TikTok. Quite a few companies, in fact, have expressed some interest, if not lots. There has also been obviously some discussion that maybe ByteDance just says, all right, fine, US, bye-bye. We're done with you. This is, the NSYNC song playing out very painfully in everyone's ears, which, by the way, you can't hear on TikTok because because TikTok can't work out music licensing. But yeah, this could become a big fight over who owns it or who will buy it. There are, I could see several possibilities. I forget who it was, but I know at least one of the big tech companies did express some interest in buying TikTok. I think it's safe to say no one would ever let Facebook/Meta do it for all the obvious reasons. I think at this stage we'd have regulatory concerns if Google tried to do it, because Google also owns YouTube. So the two most likely, or the two companies that would be most likely to want it, are almost certainly not allowed to have it. Next up, there have been, I know there were some rumblings that Elon Musk was asking about how much it would cost to get TikTok, and possibly trying to find investors, which rumors obviously exist that Larry Ellison would be very interested because, of course, he already wrangled U.S. government approval for Oracle to be the go-between on data storage for TikTok in the U.S. So, of course, he would want to go even further and just actually buy out the company. These are possibilities. I don't know what happens. And I wouldn't be surprised if maybe a lot of other companies tried to go in together to own like a combined share of it. Bear in mind, these are all possibilities. There could be a dozen different companies that all pool their money and basically say, look, we'll buy it just to keep it out of the hands of everybody else. At which point it becomes its own company with its own board and a bunch of other companies just benefit from any profit and windfall that it makes. All of these are possibilities, and they all keep the company intact as it stands today, just with basically different owners and mostly different leadership. Temu buying it. Yikes. Apple buying it would also be kind of funny. I truly cannot see Apple buying it just because Apple would never be okay with the type of content that goes on TikTok. And that would be a loser for them. Also, I don't think they would get much out of it. Just obviously, like, it would be a profit center for them, but I don't think that they would have much of a product synergy. And at that stage, like, that's not Apple. But yeah, it would be funny. Okay, so Carson, you raised this question. I wish Corbin could have been here because I have a feeling he'd have a very different answer than me, but I don't know. So where do the content creators go? Where do the consumers go? And I'm also gonna say, where do the advertisers go? Because I think those are the three different groups that are relevant to TikTok. They're the groups that are relevant to every social network. David, it's a stretch, but Apple could spin up an ad business from it. I mean, strictly speaking, Apple already has a pretty big ad business. Pretty big, not relative to Google. But they do have an ad business that's got some stuff going. You know, they do some video ads, a lot of banner ad kind of stuff, but yeah, you know, they do have one. So first off, where do the content creators go? I'll start by saying they go where the money goes. So wherever the advertisers go, to some extent, I think that matters. And this actually does play a more relevant role than I think a lot of people necessarily immediately think of. Because when you think about advertisers on TikTok, most of what you're going to think of is, here are these are the ads that we see in between TikTok videos. But that's not the advertisers I'm thinking of. The advertisers I think of are the ones who go to the people directly and say, "Hey, we'd like to sponsor." Those are the advertisers that are going to call the shots. Because look, Coca-Cola, I'm assuming, has ads on TikTok. I don't know, but let's just assume they do. They don't care if they're advertising on Instagram or YouTube or Twitter. They're going to advertise on all. Maybe they might care about Twitter, but they're going to advertise on most places. They just are. And they're probably not going to specific creators to set up like sponsored videos. But if you have like a lifestyle brand, or dare I say like diet pills, or whatever else, if you have companies that do that kind of stuff, they like specific platforms. So if they say, look, we like your stuff, we liked working with you on TikTok, but yeah, and just to be clear, this conversation is happening between them and the influencers that they work with. I'm telling it that way. But if they're telling an influencer, look, we liked working with you, we want to keep working with you, but we really don't want our stuff advertised on, let's say, Twitter, or we really don't want our stuff advertised on, let's just say, YouTube, for whatever reason. Maybe they feel like YouTube's audience is wrong for them. At that stage, they're going to call the shots. Like, they're going to tell influencers, look, we like you, but we want you marketing here. We want you to take your audience to this platform, because, and it could be YouTube, it could be Instagram, it could be whoever else. Austin bringing up Spotify. That's a weird one. I could see it happening, but I also don't see it happening. Though, funny enough, that might be their workaround to the licensing problem. That's a wild thought. Because all those licensing problems go away if Spotify becomes somehow the commanding power over TikTok. Ooh. Imagine. That'd be something. Because Spotify obviously has a good relationship with music. And they've got a lot of licensing deals worked out. Obviously, they'd still have to work out new licensing deals. Like, there's nothing about the way Spotify has their current licensing deals would even remotely allow them to just take on TikTok one day and magically say, okay, all of these licensing deals allow all the TikTok videos to now have the licensed music. That would never pass. They'd have to renegotiate their deals, or rather negotiate new licensing deals. But they like, the path to doing so would be so much easier. Anyway, Carson saying Reels algorithm surfaces too much tabloid type content. You prefer shorts, but don't think it's mainstream enough. Let me come back to that, because it fits into some of what I was going to say. I really think that this part about who advertisers care, or where advertisers want things to happen, is probably going to play a larger role, assuming TikTok gets banned. Again, all this is on the assumption TikTok gets banned, which is like a couple of assumptions down the line. So, and assuming that this is actually a ban and that TikTok doesn't get sold. Because if TikTok gets sold, this whole conversation becomes moot, mostly. Depending on who it gets sold to, there's also a possibility it gets sold to somebody who's really, really bad for it, at which point people still have to abandon it. At which point, maybe this conversation becomes relevant again. Anyway, but again, I think advertisers matter immensely in determining where some of the bigger influencers go, because all of those sponsored videos, everybody who works with a sponsor at some point or another is going to have their contact saying, look, we love you, we want to keep working with you, but if you go to Instagram, we don't think our product does well on Instagram. We're really not inclined to market there. Or if we do, like, we'd have to cut how much we're giving you, because we just don't think it's going to be the audience, or it's not worth it to us. We don't think it's going to convert. Or they could say that about YouTube. Like, I'm just picking names here, but this matters. I think it matters a lot. So there may be people who, let's just say hypothetically, if you look at their content, you might think, oh, this is a person who would perform way better on Instagram. Like, they're going to have a bigger audience on Instagram. But if the companies that they typically get sponsorships for would typically prefer YouTube, bet we would see those people go to YouTube. Or vice versa. I would almost guarantee it. Because that's where the money is anyway. Ask anyone who's on TikTok, they're not making a lot of money through the ads. They're making all their money through sponsorships. Just like YouTube, just like a lot of companies. Okay, so the next angle on this is obviously, what do the creators and influencers want to do themselves? I think in most cases, if you can look at their content and say, you know, this just looks like something that I'd see on Instagram, they're probably going to generally gravitate towards Instagram. Likewise, if what they create normally goes on YouTube, they're going to go to YouTube. Bear in mind, a lot of TikTok channels, the bigger ones or the more established names, a lot of them already are on other platforms. A fair number of them actually cross-post to different platforms anyway, or at least selectively post a few things to other platforms. There are actually a lot of people on TikTok that started on a different platform and then saw TikTok's popularity and decided, you know what, let's also post on TikTok. And they've grown really big followings there. There's a decent chance that those people are, well, not a decent chance. There's a certainty that those people will then basically say, all right, if TikTok goes away, we still have our other platforms. And they'll just focus more attention on those. But I don't think there's any version of this where the majority of people pick a single platform. I think we're just going to see a whole lot of split where some people go one direction, some people go another direction. A few of them, I mentioned this in Discord, some of them are probably going to work Faustian deals with Elon Musk, basically to the effect of, hey, as long as you're willing to pay us, we'll post on your platform. And Elon will be like, yeah, okay, if you're promising me that you can bring your whole audience over, I'm happy to pay you. I'll pay you tons of money if you bring all those people over to my Nazi site. And this will last for a couple months, a few months, something like that. And then the numbers will show. Like, people only came to the site, watched their favorite creators. They still didn't bring, like, most of these channels will successfully bring 10% maybe of their audience. Those people will come, they will watch their favorite creator, not look at anything else or look at very little else, and then they'll go away. Eventually, Twitter's staff tells this to Elon Musk. Elon's like, all right, cool, let's stop paying him. Or, you know, let's pay him less. And it'll be a relatively obvious point where a ton of those channel creators are like, cool, he stopped paying us, or he started like trying to nickel and dime us down. Forget it, we're done. We're gonna go back to a platform that actually pays. And they'll all go rushing back to Instagram, YouTube, whatever. So yeah, I'm sure there will be some number of people to go to Twitter for that. I also think there will be people trying to make something of a break for it. They'll probably obviously try to post to every platform, but I wouldn't be surprised if they try to pick maybe something that is not one of the big players. I joked about like a Fediverse, a distributed sort of solution. That would never fly because it obviously discoverability is a massive problem point. But I could see a version of this where maybe people try, what was the name of that? Okay, I'm gonna look real quick because the name is right on the tip of my tongue. I want to say like Vera or something, but that's not it. Oh, what is it? Looking through my Looking through bookmarks, trying to find it. It the site I'm thinking of, it is basically an Instagram competitor. It's fairly new. It's been heavily promoted by a couple of companies. Should have been. Oh, why am I not finding this? Okay, I can't think of the name of it. I know I created an account and I'm sure I bookmarked it. I just can't immediately find it. Anyway, so no, not Be Real. Not a bad call. That is something, but it Verta? No. Okay, let's see. Where is... No. Oh, this is annoying me. I wish I could remember who it was, but I'm even searching now and not immediately. Oh, how about this? Is it maybe going to be in one of these lists? Looking at a listicle, because why wouldn't I? I guess technically there's Triller, but that's not what I was thinking of. Okay, how about... Vero. It's called Vero. Vero. Vero.co, in case anyone's gonna look for it. So, a lot of... I noticed a lot of influencers, photographer types started kind of hyping this. The site is privately created and funded by I think he was like a guy from Dubai or something, some super rich guy, totally convinced that it would be just like the solution that everyone had, or the solution to everyone's problems with Instagram. It supports higher res images. It's generally a bit friendlier to sort of photographer types. Has a few other features that make it a little bit nicer than Instagram in a few ways, but I wouldn't say it's anything too special. I know I created an account. I have not looked at it since I created it, so I couldn't tell you how busy it is, but seeing as a lot of the people who went over to Vero didn't really ever leave the other places that they were at, I think it's safe to say that it was never really a hit. It's like the Fediverse in the sense of a lot of people kind of hopped on it. They kind of wanted to see it happen, but in all likelihood, it's not going to happen. But hey, it's if you were inclined to give it a try, it's there, it exists. Anyway, so switching back to the actual question to some extent, where do people go? I think a few people will venture out to random directions, but most of them will just kind of go back to the places that existed before TikTok took people's attention. You never know. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of them try to take a stab at Facebook. Or who knows, maybe so there was also just recently a discussion. Somebody released some statistics having to do with gaming. I saw this on another server I don't immediately have handy, but I could probably find it. Um, the guy who released the statistics was basically saying, look, the number of gamers went really high in 2021. The actual like number of gamers and peak number of hours spent gaming hit its highest point ever in 2021. It has obviously come down a little bit since then, but by and large, it's still very high. And he kind of linked this also to income, and particularly like the certain age groups not having enough money, therefore their choice of pastime is mostly gaming, because it actually can be the cheaper choice of pastime than compared to like going and doing stuff or having hobbies that involve buying stuff. Anyway, one of the side topics in this was something he called, I want to say it was black hole games, but that was his terminology for live service games. Someone asked, is it possible for new live service games to or a new entrant in live service games? And his response was basically, look, if you've already got 5 Cokes, 5 Pepsis, and a couple of other established brands, how do you step in and compete with that? Now, I would certainly argue that's actually not a very good comparison. It's actually pretty short-sighted in a lot of ways. It is also valid in its own way, and I think it also applies to social network companies. Basically, there's going to only be so many that are successful at scale, at large scale. And out of that group, the only way you're likely to ever see a new one emerge is if an old one's dying and a new one is on its come up at exactly the same time. Or if one can successfully cannibalize another. To some extent, that's what Facebook was worried about when it bought Instagram. It could see the writing on the wall. They recognized that Instagram had every possibility of stealing Facebook's thunder. So they tried to buy it, or they succeeded in buying it. They tried to do the same thing with Snap and failed, but to be fair, then they killed Snap effectively by copying every feature Snap ever created. So, yeah, I don't know that a new company is going to suddenly pop up and steal all of TikTok's old users. It could happen. I wouldn't bet on it. I think it's more likely that a lot of people will be displaced off of TikTok. Again, all of this assuming TikTok gets banned. I think a lot of people will go back to other places, and 6 months, 12 months later, once people have kind of like just decided that they're not happy with whatever place they went to, or they've had to start making adjustments to sort of fit into those other places, or many people will have even kind of fallen out. I think there would come a point where some new company that is not even very much like TikTok will emerge, but it just happens to grab whatever shred of the thing it was that made TikTok successful and popular. It will somehow capture that one thing, and it will be the bit that makes it successful. It's the part that will make people say, oh yeah, okay, this is what I'd rather do than YouTube or Instagram or wherever. But you know, that's all it's so hard to predict how any of that will play out. Also, bear in mind, like TikTok was special in a lot of ways, not least of which is it did have the funding of the CCP behind it. Like, TikTok wasn't built out of nothing. There were investments to make that a success. And obviously, like, it started off as a completely different platform in the first place, but like it was allowed to not make money. It was allowed to not be successful in the process of being made into what it became. So Yeah, you know, anyone who's going to try to take its place is probably going to need a mountain of money to fund that kind of an experiment. All right. Anyway, so um all right. And I had said that there was the other thing to consider is where the consumers go. So the people that uh, obviously the people who are the advertisers, the people who fund TikTokers, I feel like they kind of get the first choice on where a lot of the influencers go. The influencers themselves have a lot of choice where they go, at least especially if they're not kind of being pushed in one direction or another. And I think all of them are, they'll go to whatever place they are inclined to go to. Then there's the consumers. So the consumers, uh, I think a lot of them are going to do sort of what we know consumers to do, which is they stick to the thing that they already like. Which is why I also think a lot of TikTokers are going to lose massive chunks of their audience if this happens. Because fact of the matter is, if you ask a lot of people, I mean, I'm even thinking of specific people I know. Where do you go? Which social networks do you hang out on? And just ask this to people who watch TikTok. You'll find some people who say, "Oh yeah, in addition to TikTok, oh yeah, I check Instagram." Okay, those people aren't going to go to YouTube. They're not going to follow their favorite influencers over to YouTube most of the time. A few will, most won't. If somebody says, "Oh yeah, well sure," in addition to watching TikToks on like lunch breaks or whatever, after that, like when I go home at night, I watch some YouTube. Those people, they're not going to go over to Instagram. Not if they don't already check Instagram, they're not going to go over there. I don't think there's a power strong enough to get the majority of people to start using one of the big social networks if they're not already inclined to go there. So, you as a consumer, if I don't know how many people here watch anything on TikTok. I've struggled to try. I've literally tried. All I've been able to get myself to do is subscribe to a few channels, and I occasionally not occasionally, whenever those channels post videos, I open it up in a browser page, not on my phone. I watch the videos that they posted, and I never watch anything else. TikTok follower counts seem artificially inflated. I've heard people say that. I actually don't. Well, okay, look, I'm sure there are bots. Everybody actually knows that there are bots. It's just like YouTube. But are they actually inflated? I mean, beyond like bots that I'm not even sure TikTok even controls. I honestly don't think I don't think that TikTok is artificially inflating them. People just have a tendency of going around and watching videos. If they see something that they think, "Oh, that was kind of funny, sure, I'll sub this." People do it. I mean, I've heard this a lot. It's weird. People are very, very flexible with their subs on TikTok. To be fair, some people are that way on YouTube too. And I can actually think of people I know where they subscribe to a lot of channels. They don't even necessarily ever watch anything from those channels ever again. They just see something they like once, decide, sure, I'll sub that, and that's the end of the story. Maybe they'll watch, maybe they won't, but they're now subscribed. Meanwhile, I'm the exact opposite. I am meticulous about my subscription list. Uh, mostly because I actually try to watch through my subscriptions chronologically. I try not to miss videos that I want to see. which has led me to being 7 months behind in my subscription list. So, you know, that's maybe not great. But let's see. What was I going to say? Oh, yeah. Yeah, sorry. Working that out of my head. Yeah, the subscription counts do seem high, but I think that's actually just a function of how people are kind of weird about their usage. Okay, so anyway, which, not that it's super important, but just checking. Yeah, okay. Anyway, so will there be any sort of draw that takes people from the things that they already use to other stuff? I don't think so. I don't think that huge numbers of consumers are going to start hopping over to platforms that they don't already like. So if TikTok goes away, people will go back to using what they use, or what they used before TikTok, to watch stuff. A small portion will, hop over to new things or try new things, especially if they totally went to TikTok, and then when TikTok goes away, they're like, well, what do I do now? I have, like, this just suddenly created tons of time in my day. At which point, maybe they'll follow influencers over to whichever platform they go to, the majority of them. Maybe that means even going to more than one platform, but I don't think most people will. I think that's going to be the exception, not the rule. So could the thing is, I don't think any of this will come to pass. Truthfully, I really don't. I think what ends up happening is, or at least my guess, if, let's say hypothetically, purely hypothetical here, if ByteDance is the type of company that they determine that it is still worth operating in the US, and what they want to do is keep things going, I think what they do is they sell TikTok to a company that basically they find a way to create. Now I say that in a nudge nudge wink wink way. I'm not trying to be subtle about it. I think that they basically try to retain control of the company, but they create something that is on US soil, so to speak. I mean, there already is that company in effect. It just happens to have ownership that traces back to Singapore. But yeah, I think ultimately they just find a couple of puppets to be, or well, a few puppets to be C-suite executives. They have those people technically run the company, they fund them, and they quote unquote sell it to them. At which point it is a US company, and everybody is supposedly happy, including if the CCP actually is pulling the strings, they're still happy because they're probably still going to get everything that they asked for. And now thanks to the US government, it has even been officially washed. There is also a possibility that it gets sold to real companies, maybe one of the big companies that wants to compete with YouTube and Instagram and whoever else. Well, I don't know. It could happen. There are too many hypotheticals here. But ultimately, I think TikTok will probably still just be its own company. It'll go to somebody else who runs it, but I don't think we're going to really spot the difference in the end. So all of this drama, it'll change who the legal owners are, but I don't think really changes what the company does, what it looks like. It's all going to be about the same. The only question is, will they be spying on US citizens and sending that back to the CCP? Maybe. It's anybody's guess. But I honestly, I don't think if the CCP actually is doing all this stuff, I don't think we're going to stop them with this bill. Maybe I'm being overly cynical, but I think if I, as a random opinion spewer, can come up with a simple workaround, I'm pretty sure the CCP could come up with it too. But who knows? Maybe I'm smarter than all of them. I don't think so, but it could have happened. But speaking of smart people doing stupid things, I guess this is kind of last topic, though. If anyone has anything else to bring up, feel free. But a quick mention about the Roku data breach. This is, to me, so funny because, well, it's not funny, it's terrible, but it's also funny because it feels like we haven't learned. As a society, we just haven't learned. So, the Roku data breach, at least Roku's theories about this. Well, okay, before we get to the theories, a little over 15,000 accounts were hacked. The hackers managed to get in there. In many cases, they fully took over the accounts, basically changing all of the details in the accounts so that the true owners had trouble reclaiming them. And once Roku figured this out, they reverted most of those accounts back and forced a password reset. So, in other words, they had the original email addresses, most likely contacted those, and tried to reverse the damage of the hackers. So the hackers used a classic technique called credential stuffing. Basically, because of previous hacks that managed to reveal passwords to various accounts, they basically said, okay, we've got this long list of email addresses and the passwords that they used on some other site. Odds are they probably used the same email address and password on Roku service. So they tried it and found about 15,000 customers who did. This is the perpetual reminder. Do not use the same password on multiple sites. You are begging for things like this to happen. So yeah, don't do that. If you have a password manager, if you don't have a password manager, get one. Start using it. I can't imagine anybody listening to this channel is in the list of people who doesn't have a password manager that they use and creates unique passwords, but there's the advice for anyone who does. Or does not, rather. But with that password manager, use the feature that allows you to generate a password that is long and filled with garbage, because that is a lot harder to guess, and you'll create a unique password each time, so you don't have any risk of people going an exploit that exposes your password on one site. You don't have to worry about that being used to get into a different site or company's authentication. These are simple good practices these days. Just take it. Austin saying save as passkey. Look, I've said this before. Passkey has it is an improvement, and for the average user, yes, it's better. But passkey does not solve everything. And in fact, it happens to violate one of the classic rules of two-factor authentication, which is don't keep your password and the seed for your two-factor authentication step, like a one-time password generator. Don't keep those in the same place, because then if somebody manages to break into that single place, they have it. So yes, passkey is an improvement in a lot of ways, but it is sort of breaking one of those key tenets. So if someone ever breaks in and gets to a password manager or something like that, it does open you up. Though that being said, password managers, if someone gets into your password manager, 95% of the sites you go to are definitely not using two-factor authentication anyway. People are definitely getting into your passwords, and yeah, so that's not if someone gets into your password manager, you're pretty well screwed anyway. It's going to be hard to save yourself from that. So take it as you will, I guess. But yeah, anything is better than just reusing the same password on every stinking site. That is the worst practice. Oh, Austin, yes. It's I literally had that conversation, I kid you not, an hour before stream. T-Mobile, if you use T-Mobile, do not, under any circumstance, use your phone number for any sort of verification purposes, because someone absolutely can simjack you on T-Mobile. It's not hard. So many people are proving that it can still be done today. Do not let anything go through your T-Mobile number, because you're basically begging for people to simjack you and eventually steal whatever they want. It's that you're actually making it easier if you use T-Mobile, not harder. So yeah, there's it's sad that we've reached this point. That being said, honestly, I've always thought your phone number's a bad bad method for any sort of two-factor authentication. So, but that stems more from the fact that a lot of people change their numbers, that or you know, a company can screw up. You might lose your number at a certain point. Obviously, simjacking is a thing. There's so many reasons why your phone number is actually a really bad choice for two-factor authentication. So, but I understand why it gets used. So yeah, anyway. Oh, it just occurred to me, I never actually did pop the pop over to this screen. Whoops. I'm a bad multitasker. Anyway, so yeah, those were the topics I came prepared with. Did anyone else have anything they wanted to mention, or anything they wanted to tell me I'm wrong about? I should, I guess, for everyone who joined a bit later, quickly noting, I did discuss the Apple, or the Epic versus Apple fights that are currently going on, which of course over in the particular one you're seeing on screen now is the fight to get the US ruling applied that would basically force Apple to not charge a huge chunk of money for outside payment providers. The other fight that's going on, or did just happen, involving Apple canceling Epic's account that was going to be used in the EU for setting up a store, then basically being told, the way you did this was actually not legal. You did a bad thing, and eventually ultimately forcing Apple to reinstate Epic's account, though I think that's a short-lived truth. Followed by this absolutely mind-battering thing where apparently Apple is now going to allow apps to be downloaded directly from websites, but the rules that they are applying are absolutely insane. They're completely unacceptable. Let's see, I also talked about Google's new AI, Sema, that is going to help, or that is going to create fake players for games that could be used in, let's say, multiplayer games, when you yourself do not have friends. Because after all, most of us don't. I kid. And I, of course, brought up the fact that this was the reason Google should have kept Stadia, because it would give them mountains and mountains of unlimited data about players playing games. And they would have more training data than they know what to do with. Though they may have already kept all that training data, so who knows. And then, of course, from there I went into the US House ByteDance situation, or well, the build that is going to be ByteDance and TikTok. And yeah, well, you were all probably here for the rest of that. So that was the quick recap for the stream. No one is saying anything, so I'm assuming the topic list is pretty much dry after that. Speaking of dry, my throat is feeling a little dry, so it may not be the worst time to wrap it up anyway. So, let's see, plans. This weekend should be gaming as usual. Not much change there. Let's see, there is... trying to think of if there was any other specifically interesting things. I don't think so. Probably not, actually. So, next week, obviously, RambleCast as usual. Hopefully we'll get some Corbin time in on that one. And I'm brain farting as I think about the rest I'm going to say, which is thank you all for coming by and hanging out and being part of the conversation. Let's see. If you'd like to support the channel, there are links down below to Cash App, Streamlabs, and Patreon. Of course, huge thanks to those who are supporters of the channel. Carson, Austin, David, Diablo, and Kirby Mermaid. Y'all wonderful, and you help keep this channel going. One of these days, I need to have like a checklist or script or something, so I don't even have to think about this. I could just rattle it off. I'm bad at this. But, yeah. So with that, I hope you all have an excellent rest of your week, and I'll see you all in the next one. Good night, everybody.